So, have you ever like pre-ordered something and then just forgotten that you even did it, and then like months later when it actually shows up on your doorstep, you're sort of like, "Huh, what's that?" And then you open it up and you're like, "Oh yeah, I like completely forgot about that." And it's weird. Amazon actually sent me an email saying we've shipped Gravity Falls title to be revealed later. I'm like, "What the heck is that?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, of course." It doesn't say title revealed. They just didn't bother to update that part of the site. But yeah, this is a graphic novel written by Alex Hirsch. So it maintains all the great sort of quick wit comedy of the show. It's 4 stories rather than 1, which disappointed me a little bit given how short it is to begin with. But I guess, with it being a graphic novel, and maybe because it's based on a half-hour kids show, it needs to be relatively short, I guess. But yeah, it's sort of like just maybe material that was a little bit too edgy, maybe for a kids show. Like there's some slightly more violent stuff going on. Some of it's a little bit more cruel and maybe kind of mean-spirited. The stories are, for the most part, I think maybe just a little bit of material from maybe fans that thought like there was a little bit missing from certain things. First one is about Dipper and Pacifica. I know a lot of people maybe were disappointed with the way Pacifica's portrayed in the final episode. And also there's nothing between her and Dipper in that final episode to sort of wrap things up. So I guess it was for that purpose. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of Pacifica. I liked her in the Northwest Manor episode. And that was about it, really. She's a pretty forgettable character outside of that. And it's basically just Northwest Manor sort of stuff again between the two of them. But, the interactions between the two of them is quite nice. I won't spoil it, there's another little moment between the two of them, but outside of that, there's nothing else really to sort of maybe say, oh, yeah, they're a couple. Also, it's narrated by Smebulok, the gnome, who can actually talk now. That's one of my favourite moments from the show, when that gnome asks, is Smebulok all you can say? Smebulok. So he can actually talk now and actually explain why he's able to talk now. And that's kind of cool, really, just getting a sort of no-name character to actually sort of do something. The second story is probably the best. It's definitely the one that uses the medium of comics and graphic novels to its advantage. There's a lot of fourth wall breaking. I think that's kind of cool, and a lot of parodies of different genres of comics. I'm not a massive comic reader myself, but if you like comics, and even if you don't really, I think you're just going to love the sort of meta humor in that. So it makes me wonder if it's the kind of stuff you see in the Deadpool comics, maybe, because obviously he's very sort of about meta humor and being aware of what he is. The third one, I think, is probably acknowledging some of the complaints that have been from some fans that Mabel is a terrible person, all the terrible things that she does. It's maybe sort of trying to acknowledge that a little bit. It takes place after the events of Wyrmageddon. I'm not sure if we're supposed to think that this happened before Dipper and Mabel left for the summer, or if they've just come back briefly to resolve things. It's not quite. I'll have to go back and just check that. But in any event, it doesn't really sort of play into much significance. It just sort of has to take place after Wyrmageddon because of the particular route that the story takes. It's kind of interesting. Oddly enough, there's very little Dipper in that one. It's very much a Mabel-oriented story, and there's a lot of fun little jokes. It's mostly puns, actually, making fun of Mabel. And there's one particular sort of alter ego of Mabel that is maybe supposed to perhaps explain a lot of the sort of horrible things Mabel does, perhaps. I'm not sure. And then the last one is probably the weakest, and it's also the shortest. It's basically just about the Stan brothers when they were kids and the shenanigans they got up to. It's just a sort of typical adventure. So there's nothing wrong with it, really. It's nothing really I felt like I sort of needed to know or anything, and it's kind of predictable, I also feel. It's basically just a Dipper Mabel adventure, but it's the Stans instead. And also the last page actually is kind of fun. It's kind of a bit of sort of self-awareness from that as well. Maybe sort of hinting at the fact that we may get more stuff like this in the future. Yeah, overall, I kind of feel like it's a bit too short, and I would have liked it to have just been one story. But for what it is, it maintains all the sort of classic humour of the show. It did make me laugh quite a few times. The artwork, actually, see if I can find a sort of typical page. I'll just give you a typical idea of the sort of artwork. It looks a little bit cheap to me. It doesn't look as high quality as I've expected from these kind of graphic novels based on shows and everything, like the Avatar The Last Airbender books. I remember them being a lot better than that. I'll find you another page just to give you another sort of idea of what it's like. Yeah. Also, there's codes in this. There's the Bill Cipher codes and also the 3 letters back codes in there. I can't be bothered to decipher any of them, but I imagine by now the fans have probably deciphered all of them and looked them up and everything. I believe they're mostly just jokes, although there is kind of some information about Bill that's kind of interesting. There's a kind of cool little illustration of Bill on the back there, that sort of shimmering thing there. There's also a quote from Smebulok, which I thought was kind of funny. There's 2 actual quotes about the show as well from 2 creators as well, which is kind of nice. Cover's pretty sort of generic, sort of bland stuff and everything. Also, no Zeus and no Wendy on that cover, which is kind of weird because they are definitely in this, playing relatively large roles in a couple of stories. But I guess there's no stories about them in there. Maybe that's why they're not on the cover. I just thought it'd be too crowded with them. Oh, I did decipher that code that's on there. It's welcome back. But yeah, just nice to have some more Gravity Falls stuff. You know, I'm not going to say no to something like that. I am kind of interested to see though if Alex Hirsch's got any other kind of show in the works at some point. I definitely want to keep my eye out for seeing what he's going to do next, or is it just going to be more Gravity Falls stuff, just ongoing? I doubt we're going to get any more from the actual show, but more stuff like this, yeah, I would definitely be in favour of that. But maybe stuff that takes place after the events of the show, really. Only one of the 4 stories in this takes place after the events of the show. That disappointed me a little bit. But anyway, that's that, guys, and I will see you soon. Farewell.